Before his death, Randy Meisner finally breaks silence on the Eagles. For decades, the Eagles stood as one of the most dominant forces in American rock music. Their sound, built on shimmering harmonies and unforgettable songwriting, captured the restless spirit of the 1970s. Songs like Take It Easy, Lying Eyes, and the immortal Hotel California became cultural landmarks, earning the band not only commercial triumph but also a near-mythic status in popular music. Yet beneath the polished records and sold-out tours, the group was often fractured by tension. Strong personalities clashed over creative control, touring demands, and the relentless pressure of success. For Randy Meisner, the band's original bassist and co-founding member, these conflicts eventually became unbearable. Though his falsetto on Take It to the Limit remains one of the defining sounds of the Eagles, his tenure ended in exhaustion, conflict, and an enduring silence. In the years that followed his departure, Randy disappeared almost entirely from the spotlight. He rarely gave interviews, declined to participate in the endless retellings of the Eagles' saga, and resisted the urge to defend or explain himself. This silence only deepened the mystery around him. Fans speculated, was he resentful of how things ended? Did he regret walking away just as the band reached its greatest heights? Or had he simply chosen peace over fame? That quiet withdrawal became central to his identity. While Frey and Don Henley embraced fame and control, Randy was seen as the opposite. The Eagle who valued family over headlines, music over power struggles, and anonymity over celebrity. For decades, his silence created an aura of both dignity and tragedy, a reminder that behind every great success story is a personal cost. But as his life drew closer to its end, Randy finally began to open up. In rare late-life reflections, he spoke candidly about the toll the Eagles had taken on him. He admitted the weight of singing, Take It to the Limit, night after night, the exhaustion that made him seem reluctant, and the clashes with Frey that pushed him to a breaking point. He revealed how the adoration of fans gave him joy, but also how the demands of the band left him isolated and misunderstood. His words carried both sadness and peace, a recognition of the beauty of the music and the pain behind it. What emerged in these reflections was not the bitterness of a man left behind, but the honesty of someone who chose survival over self-destruction. Randy Meisner's story is not simply about rock stardom. It is about the quiet strength of walking away, the price of success, and the enduring power of music to outlast even the deepest wounds. His voice may have been silenced in 2023, but his story continues to resonate as both heartbreaking and deeply human. Early life and musical roots. Randy Herman Meisner's story began far from the flashing lights of arenas and the chaos of world tours. Born in Scottsbluff, Nebraska, in 1946, he grew up surrounded by farmland, small-town values, and a way of life that emphasized humility and perseverance. His early years were filled with chores on the family farm, long days of work that instilled in him a quiet discipline he would carry throughout his life. But even amid the dust and fields, music called to him. He first picked up the guitar, fascinated by its ability to translate feeling into sound, but by his teenage years he found his true voice in the bass. The instrument allowed him to hold the foundation of any song while still blending seamlessly into harmonies, a role that seemed to suit his unassuming nature. By the early 1960s, Randy was playing in local bands across Nebraska, performing at school dances and small-town gatherings. It was during these years that his remarkable singing voice became impossible to ignore. His high, soaring tenor carried a natural purity, one that rose effortlessly above any arrangement. That gift set him apart from countless other aspiring musicians and hinted at the role he would one day play in shaping American rock history. As the 1960s progressed, Randy knew that his ambitions could not be contained by the borders of his hometown. Like many young musicians of his generation, he set his sights on California, where a new wave of rock and country influences was colliding to create something entirely fresh. After moving west, he became a founding member of Poco, a group that helped define the emerging country rock genre. Though Randy left the band before their debut album was released, his involvement placed him squarely in the middle of a vibrant and fast-growing musical community. Shortly afterward, he joined Rick Nelson's Stone Canyon Band, further sharpening his skills as both a bassist and vocalist. These years of collaboration and exploration proved invaluable. Randy developed a versatility that made him a sought-after musician, someone equally capable of anchoring a rhythm section or delivering a heart-stopping vocal line. Unlike many of his peers, however, Randy did not chase fame with aggression. He seemed happiest simply making music, whether in front of small crowds or in studio sessions. Yet destiny had other ideas. In 1971, Frey, Don Henley, and Bernie Liddon invited him to join a new project, one that soon expanded to include Don Felder. This new group would become the Eagles, a band that would redefine rock music. and alter Randy Meisner's life forever, founding the Eagles and early success. The Eagles emerged at a time when the California country rock scene was bursting with creativity, and their formation felt almost inevitable. When Glenn Frey and Don Henley came together with Randy Meisner and Bernie Leadon, the chemistry was immediate. Each musician brought a distinct strength, but it was their collective harmony that made them extraordinary. They envisioned a sound that fused the grit of rock with the soul of country music, and from the beginning, that vision gave them an identity few other groups could match. Their voices intertwined seamlessly, producing harmonies that felt both effortless and timeless, and their early performances hinted at the global phenomenon they would soon become. In 1972, the release of their debut album Eagles announced their arrival with striking clarity. Songs such as Take It Easy, Witchy Woman, and Peaceful Easy Feeling captured audiences instantly, offering a sound that was both fresh and familiar. Randy's bass provided the heartbeat of the band, grounding their music in warmth and rhythm. Yet it was his voice, clear, aching, and powerful, that quickly became one of their greatest assets. Tracks like Take the Devil and Tryin' showcased his ability to elevate a song with emotional resonance, but it was Take It to the Limit, featured on their 1975 album One of These Nights, that forever defined him in the eyes of fans. The song was a masterwork of vulnerability and strength, with its soaring falsetto chorus becoming a centerpiece of every performance. Audiences loved it, and it became one of the band's most requested numbers. But for Randy, the song was both a triumph and a burden. Singing it demanded everything of him physically and emotionally. Night after night, he felt the strain of reaching those high notes, and with every encore, the weight of expectation grew heavier. What the world saw as a transcendent moment of artistry, Randy experienced as a constant test of his limits. As the band's success accelerated, cracks within the group began to widen. Glenn Frey and Don Henley, both ambitious and forceful, increasingly steered the creative direction and business decisions. Their leadership pushed the Eagles into superstardom, but it also left quieter voices, like Randy's, struggling to be heard. Though he contributed meaningfully, he often found himself overshadowed by stronger personalities, his gentler nature ill-suited to the battles over control. Still, those early years were marked by a sense of magic. The Eagles were not just a band but a cultural force, selling out arenas, dominating radio airwaves, and capturing the California dream in sound. For Randy, it was an extraordinary journey, one that brought him pride and recognition, but also planted the seeds of tension that would later reshape his path. Pressure, conflict, and departure. By the mid-1970s, the Eagles had become far more than a successful rock band. They were a global powerhouse, a business empire built on platinum records, sold-out tours, and relentless pressure to stay at the top. Every member felt the weight of this success, but for Randy Meisner, the quiet bassist from Nebraska, the burden became unbearable. His struggles centered on one song that both defined and tormented him, Take It to the Limit. Fans adored the soaring ballad, demanding it at every show, but its challenging high notes pushed Randy's voice to extremes, leaving him drained night after night. When he pleaded to skip the performance or adjust the setlist, his bandmates refused. Glenn Frey, always focused on perfection and the band's reputation, clashed with Randy repeatedly, insisting the song was not optional. By 1977, tensions had reached a breaking point. During a heated argument on tour, Randy finally snapped. The endless grind of travel, the internal battles, and the unrelenting spotlight proved too much. At the very height of the Eagles' fame, he made the painful decision to walk away. Leaving meant giving up unimaginable wealth and the chance to remain part of one of the most iconic bands in history. Yet for Randy, peace mattered more. He wanted health, family, and balance, not the punishing demands of superstardom. His departure shocked fans but did little to slow the Eagles' rise. Timothy B. Schmidt stepped into his role, and the band continued to dominate the charts. For Randy, life after the Eagles was quieter and less glamorous. While he enjoyed moments of success, he also wrestled with regrets and the sense that his contributions had been overshadowed by the band's enduring legacy. Though his decision cost him fame, it reflected who he truly was, a man unwilling to sacrifice his sanity for the spotlight. Life after the Eagles. After leaving the Eagles, Randy Meisner carved out a quieter path that reflected both his strengths and his temperament. He launched a solo career that began with the release of his self-titled album Randy Meisner in 1978, followed by One More Song in 1980 and another self-titled record in 1982. These albums showcased his tender songwriting style and the soaring tenor voice that had once made Take It to the Limit unforgettable. Yet without the massive promotional machine of the Eagles behind him, his solo success remained modest. He did not storm the charts or pack stadiums, but he built a loyal following who appreciated his heartfelt and unpretentious music. Beyond his solo work, Randy continued to collaborate with other musicians. He joined projects like Black Tie and World Classic Rockers, where he shared the stage with fellow veterans of the rock world. These endeavors kept him connected to music, but unlike many of his contemporaries, Randy never chased the spotlight with relentless ambition. He preferred smaller, more intimate venues, where the atmosphere was relaxed and the pressure was minimal. Music remained his passion, but he wanted to play on his own terms rather than live inside the machinery of fame. As the years went on, Randy's professional life slowed while his personal struggles grew. He battled recurring health problems, including stomach ulcers and eventually chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, which affected both his comfort and his ability to perform. Financially, he lived a modest but stable life, never achieving the staggering fortunes of his former bandmates, yet never seeming to crave them either. He valued simplicity over extravagance, even if it meant his career never reached the same heights again. Still, no matter where he went or what he did, Randy could never fully step out of the Eagles' shadow. Fans inevitably brought him back to that era, asking about his experiences in the band and almost always requesting take it to the limit. For Randy, these reminders carried a mixture of pride and pain. On one hand, he was part of one of the most legendary rock bands in history, leaving behind music that had touched millions. On the other, those memories reopened the wounds of conflict and burnout that had driven him away. His life after the Eagles reflected both contentment and simplicity and the lingering weight of what he had left behind, breaking his silence. For decades after leaving the Eagles, Randy Meisner chose silence. While Don Henley and Glenn Frey gave interviews, shaped narratives, and defended the band's decisions, Randy largely stayed in the background. He rarely commented on the inner conflicts or his departure, preferring to let the music speak for itself. Yet as the years passed and his own story risked being overshadowed, Randy began to share more openly in the years leading up to his death. In rare and candid interviews, he acknowledged the heavy toll the Eagles had taken on him. He spoke about the constant battles over take it to the limit, the punishing expectations, and the loneliness he often felt even while surrounded by fame. Fans cherished the song, but for Randy, performing it night after night was draining, both physically and emotionally. What some bandmates interpreted as stubbornness or uncooperativeness was, in truth, exhaustion. His resistance was never about ego. It was about survival. Randy admitted that leaving the Eagles was both the hardest and the wisest choice he ever made. On one hand, it spared him from the burnout, excess, and darker temptations that consumed many of his peers. On the other, it cost him the camaraderie of the band, the creative energy of their peak years, and the recognition that came with being part of a cultural phenomenon. That trade-off lingered with him for the rest of his life. When Randy finally broke his long silence, his tone surprised many. He spoke without bitterness. There was no anger directed at Glenn Frey, despite their infamous clashes, nor resentment toward the others who had carried on without him. Instead, his words were reflective, tinged with sadness but also acceptance. His quiet years, he explained, had been a form of self-protection, a way to guard his peace. In his final reflections, Randy wanted fans to know the truth: he had always loved the music. But the personal cost of staying in the Eagles had simply been too high. His legacy, in the end, was not only in the songs but also in his courage to walk away, personal struggles and tragedy. Although Randy Meisner managed to avoid many of the destructive excesses that defined the rock and roll lifestyle, his personal life was marked by hardship and heartbreak. For years, he faced serious health challenges, including chronic lung disease that restricted his ability to perform and travel. Music, once his greatest source of joy, became increasingly difficult for him to share on stage. Yet the greatest blow came in 2016 with the sudden and tragic death of his wife, Lana Ray. She died in an accidental shooting at their home, an event that left Randy devastated and shaken to his core. Already weakened by declining health, Randy now had to endure the crushing weight of grief. Friends and family noticed the change immediately. Once reserved but approachable, he became more withdrawn, retreating almost entirely from public life. His children and close friends tried to surround him with support, but the loss of Lana Ray left a wound that never fully healed. For someone who had already carried the scars of fame, exhaustion, and fading health, this tragedy was perhaps the heaviest burden of all. Yet those who knew Randy best said his gentle spirit never wavered. Even in the face of overwhelming sorrow, he remained soft-spoken, humble, and kind. He did not lash out at life, nor did he grow bitter from the difficulties he endured. Instead, he carried himself with quiet resilience, choosing dignity over despair. To the end, Randy Meisner embodied a rare humility in a world often defined by ego and spectacle. His hardships revealed his strength, a strength rooted not in showmanship or bravado, but in his ability to remain kind even as life tested him again and again. Final reflections before death, In the final years of his life, Randy Meisner began to let down the walls of silence he had carefully built around himself for decades. For so long, he had avoided the spotlight and refused to engage in the endless debates about the Eagles' history. But as he grew older, especially in the years leading up to his death in July 2023, Randy found a gentler way to look back. In interviews and conversations, he admitted that, despite all the pain and conflict, he was deeply proud of what the Eagles had achieved. He recognized that their music had not only defined an era but had endured across generations, and he felt humbled that his own soaring voice had become such a memorable part of that legacy. When fans told him how much "Take It to the Limit" meant to them, he listened with quiet gratitude. To know that a song he had once struggled to perform had touched millions gave him comfort in his later years. Even after decades of separation from the band, Randy understood that fans never forgot him. They reminded him constantly that his role in the Eagles had mattered, even if history sometimes seemed to spotlight others more brightly. That recognition meant far more to him in his final years than the wealth or fame he might have missed out on. While he had walked away at the height of success, he never walked away from the music in his heart, and it was deeply meaningful to see how his contributions had continued to resonate long after the spotlight had dimmed. His reflections carried a mixture of sadness and peace. He did not shy away from acknowledging the difficult moments, the battles over Take It to the Limit, the exhaustion, and the clashes with Frey. Yet he refused to let those conflicts define his story. Instead, he chose to highlight the joy of performing, the exhilaration of creating music that would stand the test of time, and the friendships that endured despite the turbulence. He seemed at ease with the choices he had made, even if they had come with sacrifice. By the time of his passing, Randy Meisner had broken his silence, not with bitterness or regret, but with honesty and acceptance. He left fans with the truth of his journey, that he had loved the music, that he was proud of his place in rock history, and that, despite the cost, he found peace in knowing his voice would always live on. The forgotten peacemaker of the Eagles, while Frey and Don Henley became known as the driving forces, and sometimes the combatants, of the Eagles, Randy Meisner often played the quiet role of peacemaker. Band insiders remembered him as the gentle soul who tried to calm arguments rather than escalate them. His Nebraska upbringing and humble nature made him uncomfortable with constant power struggles, and he frequently found himself caught between stronger personalities. This role was both a blessing and a curse. It allowed the band to function during tense moments, but it also left Randy drained, as he carried the emotional weight of keeping peace in a group where egos often collided. Looking back, it becomes clear that his quiet diplomacy was one of the reasons the early Eagles held together long enough to create their greatest work. Why his voice still matters. Randy Meisner's legacy goes far beyond the internal drama of the Eagles. His high, aching falsetto became one of the band's most defining sounds, turning "Take It to the Limit" into not just a hit, but an anthem of vulnerability. At a time when rock music was often about swagger and bravado, Randy gave it tenderness. His voice carried fragility, longing, and raw emotion, qualities that made fans feel the songs in their bones. Even decades later, new generations discover his work and are struck by the honesty in his delivery. His voice is a reminder that behind every great band are not just leaders, but quiet contributors whose artistry can change the shape of music history. Randy may not have sought the spotlight, but his sound remains unforgettable, a piece of rock's emotional heart that will never fade. Legacy of Randy Meisner. Randy Meisner's passing on July 26, 2023 at the age of 77 brought to a close the life of a man whose presence had shaped one of the most important bands in rock history. Though often overshadowed by louder personalities and greater fame, Meisner's contributions to the Eagles remain irreplaceable. As the band's original bassist, he anchored their sound with steady precision. As a vocalist, he reached emotional heights that gave their music its most unforgettable moments. His performance on "Take It to the Limit" is still regarded as one of the most soaring achievements in rock, a song that continues to resonate with generations of listeners. His story, however, was never just about fame or acclaim. It was about contrasts. He was a farm boy from Nebraska who became part of one of the biggest rock bands in the world. He was a man capable of electrifying audiences of tens of thousands, yet he found his truest peace in quiet family life. He gave the world music of immense beauty, but he also carried deep personal heartbreak and the weight of inner struggles. Through it all, Randy remained remarkably humble, never seeking the spotlight for its own sake. For decades, his silence defined him as much as his music. He avoided the endless feuds and public narratives that followed the Eagles, choosing instead to step back from the noise. Some mistook that for weakness, but in truth it was strength. the strength to prioritize peace over ego, to choose authenticity over spectacle, and to guard his own well-being in an industry that often consumed its brightest talents. When in his later years he finally spoke more openly about his past, what he offered was not bitterness but honesty. He acknowledged the toll that fame had taken, but he also expressed gratitude for the fans, for the music, and for the chance to have been part of history. The Eagles' story cannot be told without Randy Meisner. His bass lines gave their songs depth and rhythm. His harmonies added lightness and grace, and his voice on "Take It to the Limit" gave the band one of its most transcendent anthems. That song remains his legacy, soaring high, straining toward the infinite, capturing both the beauty and the burden of his journey. Every time it plays, Randy lives on, the quiet eagle whose gentle spirit and enduring music will continue to echo long after his passing. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more powerful stories from Hollywood's past and present, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps us keep bringing you the untold truths and unforgettable moments that shape the stars we all know.